Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be comparing methods of coordination, or more specifically, coordination by hormones against coordination by nerves, so hormonal system versus the nervous system ultimately. Now the nervous and hormonal system form the two main forms of coordination in mammals. Now before we start to compare the two, I think it's important to address why coordination is so important. If I just draw a very simple picture of a blastocyst. So after you've had a egg cell fertilized by a sperm, you get this ball of cells called the blastocyst. So just going to imagine they're very simple blastocyst is a ball of cells that have developed from the zygote. None of those cells have specialized. None of those cells have adapted to carry out a particular function or job. But ultimately they will. Some of them will specialize or differentiate to form red blood cells. Colour in just a bit of an example. So we've got here that biconcave red blood cell shape. Some of them will form nerve cells. So just drawing here a few dendrites. Got the axon terminals. I've got myelin. It's not a particularly great diagram, but you get where I'm going with this. It's got nerve cell, maybe muscle. So what I'm just drawing here are some smooth muscle cells, characteristic smooth muscle cells with central nucleus here. So we've got red blood cells, we've got neurons, we've got muscle. You can see once cells have specialized, once they've gone from an undifferentiated state to a differentiated state, as we've shown here, then they actually lose their ability to carry out particular functions. So a cell specialised for one function, they actually lose their ability to carry out others. And so they rely on alternate systems in order to work. So for example, the reason why I'm starting with this is because if you take a muscle cell may require nervous innervation. And it would also require the circulatory system to provide oxygen for cellular respiration. So it's really important that when we compare these methods, the hormonal versus nervous system, that we don't forget that actually they rely on one another. And as I've used in this example, the muscle cell would require nervous innervation and a circulatory system to provide oxygen for processes like respiration. But ultimately in this video we're going to compare the two. We're going to look at the difference between the hormonal system compared with the nervous system. So let's think about hormones. We'll make a little table. So we've got the hormonal system versus the nervous system. Now, when you're answering examination questions on this, it's always important that you give opposing statements. So not that one thing is X and so the other isn't. You have to be very, very explicit about what you're saying for both of these. So I'll give you an example. Communication in the hormonal system is by hormones, chemicals produced by endocrine glands. So there's point one, that communication is by hormones. Now, communication in the nervous system is not by hormones. Communication in the nervous system is by nerve impulses. So the transmission of nerve impulses from one nerve perhaps to another. So there's our first point. And linking back to what I've just ended on, transmission. Transmission of that communication is by the blood system for the hormones. So in terms of transmission, we're talking for the hormonal system by the blood system. If we think about endocrine glands, they secrete hormones directly into the bloodstream, whereas in the nervous system, again, transmission, it's not by the blood system, it is by neurons, specialised nerve cells. So there's a second point. Point 3, transmission is usually very slow. When we think about hormones, as opposed to nerves, where transmission, as you can guess, is very fast. When we think about where these hormones are travelling to, they travel to all parts of the body, but only target cells respond. So hormones travel to all body parts, but only target organs respond. Now, for nerves, however, nerves aren't quite, or nerve impulses rather, don't travel quite in the same mechanism. They don't necessarily go to every part of the body, they go to a very specific target location. So, for example, as I'm writing, nervous impulses are being transmitted towards the muscles of my hand to be able to move the stylus that I'm ultimately writing with. So hormones travel to all parts of the body, but only the target organs respond. For nerves, the impulses are directed to very specific, and the word I'm going to use is the word to describe a muscle or a gland that specifically responds to that nervous impulse, and it's effectors. So if I shrink the screen just slightly, so we can add a little bit more to this list, so if we raise this up to there, we can put in a few more differences between these two. So let's think about the actual response. The response in the hormonal system is widespread in the body. The response certain hormones have, so think about adrenaline, for example, really good example, the response is widespread. Whereas in the nervous system, the response is not widespread. In fact, it is much more localized because it's targeted. So we could say this is a localized response. We can add a bit more. When we talk about the response, we can also say that response, if we were to describe it, we would say for the hormonal system that it's slow. It is, however, long-lasting. And the effects would be permanent and long-lasting. So the response is so long-lasting and the effects are permanent and also long-lasting. In fact, I'll put that one as a separate bullet point there. So if we were to look at the nervous system and directly compare, the response, however, here for nerves is, as you can expect, the opposite. It's not slow, it's very fast, but it is short lasting. And equally, when we think about the effects of nerve impulses, a good example again, if you think about the nerve impulses moving to my hand to write this out, they're not permanent. And again, I'll just put short lasting. So there we have a very straightforward comparison between the hormonal system and the nervous system. And you look at it in terms of communication and by transmission, the fact that transmission is very fast in one, slow in the other, that nerve impulses tend to be directed to specific effectors, whereas hormones travel to all parts of the body. When we look at the response and effects, for hormones in the hormonal system, we've got widespread response, but it's slow, long-lasting with potentially long permanent effects. Whereas for the nervous system, we've got a very localized response that's very fast, but short-lasting, and it has no long permanent effects. So there we have a little bit about the coordination or methods of coordination and the comparison between the two. But keep in mind this idea that I said right at the beginning up here with the image, that when you are comparing methods of coordination, even though the two are very, very different, they do rely on one another. Okay, hope all that helps.